Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible military showdowns of the 19th century. We're talking about the Battle of Adwa, a single day that stopped an empire in its tracks and sent a message that echoed all around the world.
So think about that for a second. This isn't just some historical what if. This is the central question of our story today. It's the tension that builds and builds until it leads to this explosive confrontation that basically challenged everything people thought they knew about power at the time. Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. It's the late 1800s. Picture a map of Africa being literally sliced up like a cake by European leaders thousands of miles away. They called it the Scramble for Africa, and it was this relentless wave of colonization that was swallowing up almost the entire continent. It seemed totally unstoppable. So how did this massive colonial land grab lead to an actual war in Ethiopia? Well, it didn't start with a bang, but with a pen. The whole conflict really sparked from a single treaty that meant two completely different things to the people signing it. And this is the document right here, the Treaty of Wachali. Now, on the surface, it looks pretty standard. Italy and Ethiopia making friends, agreeing to trade. Seems simple enough, right? What could possibly go wrong? Well, famous last words. The devil, as they say, was in the details. And the real kicker is in Article 17. Take a look at these two versions. The Italian text says Ethiopia must go through Italy for all its foreign policy. Basically, it turns Ethiopia into a puppet state. But the Amharic version, the one Emperor Menelik II actually read and agreed to, says Ethiopia can use Italy's help if it wants to. It's a choice. One is a command, the other is an option. This was no translation error. It was a diplomatic time bomb. So once that deception comes to light, a collision is pretty much guaranteed. And what comes next is this amazing story of contrasts. You've got the arrogance of an empire on one side and the incredible unified will of a nation on the other. The Italian military commanders were just dripping with overconfidence. They looked at the Ethiopian forces with this really dismissive attitude, thinking they were just a disorganized, badly armed group that would be no match for a modern European army. Honestly, they were planning for a victory parade, not a real war. And you've got to understand, for Italy, this was about more than just land. They were a relatively new power in Europe and were desperate for the kind of prestige that only a colonial empire could bring. So in their minds, Ethiopia was just supposed to be this easy, shiny prize that would put them on the world stage. But while the Italians were busy underestimating them, Ethiopia was mobilizing. And this is what the Italians were completely blinded by. Emperor Menelik rallied a national army of around 100,000 soldiers. It absolutely dwarfed the Italian force sent to fight them. And this just shows you, this is not some disorganized mob. It was a masterclass in strategy, led by Emperor Menelik II and the brilliant Empress Taitubi. They exposed the treaty's deception to everyone. Then they did the unthinkable. They got rival regional leaders, people who were enemies, to put aside their differences and unite against this common threat. And the final piece? For years, they'd been buying modern weapons. So when the time came, they weren't just a huge army. They were a unified, motivated, and well-equipped army. And so the stage was set. You have an overconfident colonial army marching deep into the territory of a nation that was totally prepared for them. The collision point would be the rugged highlands near a town called Adwa on March 1st, 1896. The battle itself was just a complete catastrophe for the Italians. They marched at night using faulty maps, and their three main brigades got completely lost and separated in the confusing mountains. By mid-morning, the Ethiopian forces, using their sheer numbers and their knowledge of the terrain, just swarmed them, ambushing the isolated Italian units. By the afternoon, what was left of the Italian army had completely collapsed into a chaotic retreat. And this chart, well, it really shows you the devastating result. The Italian forces were absolutely annihilated. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a rout. It was one of the worst colonial military disasters of the entire century. The Ethiopian victory was just total and undeniable. But the story of Adwa doesn't end there. Its impact went way beyond the battlefield. The result of this one fight sent shockwaves across the globe, becoming a powerful symbol that didn't just redraw political maps, but the maps in people's minds too. Seriously, just try to imagine hearing this news back then. In an era where European military superiority was just seen as a fact of life, an African army had decisively crushed a European one.
That one event just shattered the myth of invincibility that the whole colonial project was built on.
When you look back, the legacy of Adwa is just immense. For starters, it secured Ethiopia's independence, making it a beacon of freedom on a continent being carved up by colonizers. The Italian government literally collapsed from the shame. But even bigger than that, Ottawa became a foundational story for Pan-Africanism and for anti-colonial movements all over the world. It was real, tangible proof that resistance wasn't useless.
And that kind of leaves us with this big question. Adwa was the exception, not the rule, when it came to colonial conquest. But it really makes you wonder, right? How different would the 20th century have been, and how different would the world we live in today be if this story of determined, victorious resistance had been the rule and not the exception?